So how do you feel about the East Village changing? Hello and welcome to Carspotting. This week we're right in the middle of Manhattan, right by Cooper Union. We're next to this really big, weird building, and you always find interesting cars parked next to this thing for some reason. So I've got a good feeling we're going to find something cool. Let's check it out. Yeah, I lived in this neighborhood when this building went up, and it was really funky, and I would always come here looking for interesting cars. I think because the building had a power of attraction, but it would draw people who owned weird cars because they wanted to like make a pilgrimage to the building. If they were going to park in the neighborhood, they were going to park near the big weird building. So you'd see things like a Porsche 356 used to park over here, and one of my favorite cars in the neighborhood happens to be right here. A Porsche Type 986 Boxster. This is actually a very cool car. One, because it's yellow, and two, this car has been parking on the street for as long as I've been in New York City. This thing is an absolute survivor as it becomes more and more vintage with each passing day. Come rain, come sleet, come snow, this thing is parked on the street, just totally living out a regular New York City commuter car life, even though it's a mid-engine sports car. Because I appreciate our cameraman, and I want to elevate Carspotting, I made notes, furiously scribbled notes, so that I would remember things about the history of the Boxster, because it's a very interesting car, and I can explain sort of why. The Boxster came out in 1996. It's a product of the early 1990s from Porsche. So in the 1980s, if you go all the way back into the 70s, Porsche, you sort of think of having this like sort of golden age in the 70s, but really it wasn't doing a lot to modernize itself. Finances by the late 70s really started to drop, and in the early 80s they took in a new guy running the show who was an American who really modernized Porsche, the company. Started making it sort of the Porsche that we know today as being super techy and super modern. And in the yuppie years, Porsche was very successful. But the board, or whoever was running Porsche at the time, really didn't like this American guy, I imagine, because they booted him out. And the problem was by the time the early 90s had come around, all of that momentum they had from the early 80s in those yuppie years had sort of fallen by the wayside, and they were back where they were in the 70s, with cars that were kind of behind the times, struggling to meet noise and emissions regulations. They needed something to sort of revitalize the company. Now in the late 80s, Mazda had sort of shocked the world with the Miata, with a car that was unbelievably popular, and though it was a sort of niche sports car, very profitable. And the whole automotive world looked to the Miata for inspiration, and Porsche decided to make a Miata of its own. And Porsche being Porsche, they couldn't just simply make a little boring front-engine sports car, so they made a mid-engine sort of tribute to their old 550 Spider 1950s glory days. And this is what we have here. It was a it's mid-engined. This is that came out with a 2.5 liter flat 6, even though the current ones have a flat 4. Had about 200 horsepower, weighed only about 2,700 pounds, and was very successful, and actually did help revitalize Porsche and make it sort of the more successful modern company that we know today. Though a lot of sort of Porsche hardcore guys were not happy with the Boxster. If you come over here, come look at the front of the thing. And it's got these sort of, they called them fried egg headlights. These were pretty much shared with the 911 of the time, which was a very sort of controversial car at the time because it was water-cooled, and instead of being sort of like designed with sort of traditional German durability, they partnered up with Toyota, and the cars were much more sort of made to cost. And they were profitable, but not really supposedly as long-lasting. They went from air-cooled to being water-cooled. If you look up on Porsche forums, you'll find a whole thing about how the length of the bolts became shorter when they were making these cars. But you still find ones that are being cherished and taken care of that are surviving in spite of everything. This one having really lived quite a life. Clearly someone has driven straight into it. Maybe because they just focused on the yellow. But I think this is a really iconic car for New York City, showing a lot of grit and determination and a little bit of style. One of my favorites. Oh, yeah. Hey, oh, there he is. What's up? Welcome to Carspotting, the show in which I forget that I'm on a show and just wander away from the camera. It's good. I was watching some of the last episode and I realized most of it was just my back, just wandering around. Oh, look at this. I think this is a... I don't know if this is an aftermarket grill for a Corolla or for a Nissan that the guy just sort of squeezed in there. It's probably fine. It's fine. Who says you can't modify cars anymore? Here's a very nice M3. Can't talk about that. It's a boring car. It's new. People aren't tuning in to see a new M3. That's crazy talk. Let's turn this around. Let me point out this big old Jeep. Choppy fenders. A couple years ago, it was like a Jeep summer in New York City, and absolutely everyone had one of these things. And then there was like a BMW summer, and I feel like in the past 2 summers there hasn't been like a one car of New York quite like these things. Anyway, they're funny to see in New York because you really don't need them. They're the opposite of a useful city car. Look at this. Look what we'll get to see. Get to see one of my favorite neon signs. Wow, sign watch, sign spotting New York City. Check this guy out. This is a classic original. Lots of people are making new neon that looks old in the city. See the OG stuff. Welcome to dog spotting New York City. Found some very good dogs. Look at friggin' this! Check this out! We lucked out. Oh man, this thing is sick. I would call this a dolphin trailer, but it's not. I think it's another variation of it. Look at this. This is an old 1980s Toyota with an RV back. This thing friggin' rules. Look at this. It's still got California plates. Look at how minute this thing is. This thing is tiny, and yet it's a full little house in here. This is amazing. Look at, you can clearly date when this vehicle was made by the tape stripes alone. Nothing says early 80s like brown on brown. It's more like a goldenrod. This is the color of like all of the textbooks I had in elementary school. Wow, look at this. This is actually a manual transmission, little RV. You've got a little sleeping top thing. This is super nice. Can we see what year it is? Oh my God, it's got a beach parking pass from Huntington Beach. Can you imagine? This is like a Jim Rockford vehicle. Could be solving crimes in this thing. These are bugs, man. This is the Midwest, I assure you. Nowhere in America has bugs like that other than the Midwest. This thing probably drove here. Look at these super useful bumpers as well. No one makes a bumper like this. It's just solid steel. So good. It should be, of course, also no surprise that this is a California car because it's an old Toyota and it hasn't rusted away. Nor has it been bought by some, like, wannabe vintage dude and over-restored. Even though this thing is clearly from the early 80s, it's like being used just as a truck, not as like a vintage experience lifestyle vehicle. This is just what someone is living out of. This thing rules. This could be us. This could be us. If you had your life together, you too could be driving around in a unbelievably slow RV. So how do you feel about the East Village changing? Think things are different ever since the new Cooper Union building came in? A lot more money in the area?
Yeah, it's really different than it was before, Raph.
Thanks, Maserati. Good to hear from you.
Welcome. Thanks, bud.
All right, thanks for tuning into this week's Car Spotting. I think we found some interesting vehicles, and I think we'll find some even better ones next week. Maybe all red vehicles, or maybe they'll be all blue. Probably not, but who knows? We'll see. Time will tell. Stay tuned. Next week. I'll be right there. Just give me 1 minute. I'll just get right. All right, there we go. Yeah, cars. So in the 1980s, if you go all the way back into the 70s,
Porsche, you sort of think of having this like sort of golden age in the 70s, but really it wasn't doing a lot to modernize itself.
And finances by the late 70s really started to drop. And in the early 80s,